Greater Cincinnati was ranked the second hottest market by Zillow. There is a lot of reasons why it's been a hot area to be in, but there's a lot of people that sometimes get confused and don't realize that Northern Kentucky is part of Greater Cincinnati. In fact, when you land at the Greater Cincinnati Airport, CVG, you're actually landing in Northern Kentucky. Hi, I'm Scott Oyler, and I am here with Brandy Schildmeyer with Oyler Hines. Today, we're breaking down the pros and cons of living on the Ohio side of the river or the Kentucky side of the river.
This isn't going to be the typical breakdown. We're really going to go through the pros and cons of living on both sides of the river. We get these questions all the time. We have clients moving into town, maybe they're relocating, thinking about a lifestyle change, and they're asking us, hey, what about Northern Kentucky? Is that a place we should consider? Or they're asking about Cincinnati. And as the #1 real estate team in Cincinnati, we have these questions so often that we want to make sure we have the best answer. So we're going to take a deep dive into the things that make Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky different and tell you, kind of our take on what we think of both sides of the river.
Okay, so Brandy, let's break it down.
Okay.
How about we start off with not such a fun topic, but it is something that you have to talk about when deciding whether to live in Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati, and that is traffic.
Yes, and it's a driving factor, we would say, for the people who are trying to decide what their commute's going to look like, what they're going to have to deal with every day, what's their time to get to work, their time to get home from work, how convenient is it to their schools? So it's something that we have to discuss.
Yeah, and by far the traffic on the Kentucky side of the river is much worse, and that's because of the bridges. You got to cross that bridge, and a lot of the jobs are in Cincinnati. So a lot of the folks that are coming from Northern Kentucky to the Ohio side of the river, those bridges can get pretty backed up. But there's good news.
There is. The Brent Spence Bridge Corridor project is underway. Everything's getting started. We've seen all the drawings, all the plans. It is going to be a great change for that traffic situation across the bridge. And I know it's going to be a headache while it's going on. Everybody's kind of braced themselves for it, but hopefully it will alleviate some of that congestion getting from Cincinnati into Northern Kentucky. Of course, there are actually 8 bridges connecting Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. Some are pedestrian bridges, so a lot of different ways around. And I know right now a lot of people are trying to avoid the Brent Spence Bridge, but I'm really hoping this project will make it easier. They're calling it a once-in-a-generation opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, it's actually what, a $3.6 billion with a B?
With a B,
with a B project. So it's going to help transform that whole corridor over there and alleviate some of the traffic. And if you're, one who maybe has to go to the airport a lot, then you probably want to be on the Northern Kentucky side of the river.
You do. I mean, then you don't have to worry about backups getting across the bridge or getting into that part of Northern Kentucky. It's just easier if you're over there. We have a lot of people who say they travel a lot. They want to be near that Erlanger, maybe Hebron area, just to make that commute so much easier for them.
Yeah, to the airport. But overall, we're going to have to give the nod to the Ohio side of the river when it comes to traffic. Right now, if you're in Northern Kentucky, it's a little bit of a headache getting into Ohio, or if you're in Ohio, getting into Northern Kentucky on that way home with some of those backups. But good news with the bridge project coming.
Right, exactly.
A lot of those commute times going into Ohio are tough, right? But a lot of that is because that's where the jobs are.
Right. It's actually a benefit for Cincinnati.
It is. Yeah. It's a huge benefit. We actually have 5 Fortune 500 companies in Greater Cincinnati and located in Cincinnati. The biggest of them being the Kroger Company, Procter & Gamble, Fifth Third, Western Southern, and of course Cintas, which is a lot further north up Cincinnati. But certainly we have some strong companies in Greater Cincinnati and in the Cincinnati area. It's not to say there are some awesome employers over in Northern Kentucky and some large companies on that side of the river, but if jobs are important to you, certainly Cincinnati gets the edge on that side.
Tends to be some more opportunities on the Cincinnati side.
But let's talk a little bit about views.
Yeah, the views, Kentucky has it over Cincinnati because the best view of the Cincinnati skyline is from Northern Kentucky. So if you're wanting an amazing view, you've got some river, you've got some skyline, you're going to want to be on the Northern Kentucky side of the river.
Absolutely. I mean, when you come through the cut in the hill, it is absolutely gorgeous. When just looking at that greater Cincinnati skyline. And we have a couple of projects as well that kind of take advantage of those skyline views.
We do. Martin's Gate in Newport has the best views of the Cincinnati skyline. We have beautiful rooftop townhomes. It really is. It's one of the best views. I've sat up there and watched the fireworks, maybe even a Reds firework night. It is an amazing view of that skyline. You see the fireworks, you see into the stadiums. I can see the Bengals score from there if I want to. So you can really see a lot from Martin's Gate.
Yeah, awesome views. So if views are what you're looking for, the Kentucky side of the river definitely gets the nod there.
Right, and if you want to be right on the water, Manhattan Harbor has some amazing riverfront living opportunities. Just you're right on the water. It does feel like it's the closest that you get without being in the water.
That's right, and that is a great project.
It is.
So let's talk a little bit about entertainment.
Yes.
Right, so obviously you want to be active, you want to be involved in the community, and there is a lot to do on the Cincinnati side of the river.
There is.
Right?
I mean, you've got some amazing things. You've got some amazing sports teams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have the Bengals, the Reds, FC Cincinnati. If you're a college sports fan, you have Xavier. My favorite, University of Cincinnati. That's where I went, and a season ticket holder, diehard Bearcat for both the basketball and football games, especially now that they're in the Big 12. So there's a lot of excitement around that. But if you're a sports fan, lots of stuff to do. And even, the Cincinnati Cyclones.
Oh, right.
But across the river, they do have the Florence Yawls. It's kind of a fun scenery there to catch, a semi-pro type baseball game over there as well. And then they've got these neat little districts throughout, Cincinnati on both sides of the river. On the Ohio side, we have the Banks, which is right along the Ohio River banks, in between the two stadiums, the Red Stadium and Paul Brown Stadium, where the Bengals play. A lot of food options, bars, and entertainment district and area, as well as OTR. If you're a foodie, holy cow, one of the best spots in Greater Cincinnati to catch a great meal. A lot of small, independent restaurants there. So if you're into that foodie scene, a great spot. But Northern Kentucky has some great spots as well.
Northern Kentucky does. Main Strasse, when we're talking about these little pockets of, fun activities, that's a great area. So much going on there, little festivals. It's a lot of fun. Also, Newport on the Levee, and they have the $135 million Margaritaville project coming there. It's going to be a resort. It's a lot of development going on at Newport on the Levee. Also, they have Megacore Pavilion, which is one of 3 indoor-outdoor concert venues in the U.S.
Yeah.
So a lot going on in Northern Kentucky right now. And if you live in Northern Kentucky and you want to get over to catch a Reds game, go to a football game, you can always walk across a bridge.
Yeah, or even take one of the ferries right across.
Exactly. So kind of some fun transportation options to get across the river, maybe without the premium of the parking.
Yeah, and if you're an arts fan, the Ohio side of the river, over at Music Hall, from the opera to the Pops to the Cincinnati Ballet Company, one of the top ballet companies in the country, they've got it covered there. But overall, there's great options on either side of the river, but we're gonna probably have to give this one to the Cincinnati side.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, with the sports teams,
and
I think it gets the edge.
Yep. So now that we've talked about some traffic and views and some of the fun stuff, what about dollars, like cost of living? Right?
And I think that's what it comes down to for a lot of people. I mean, some of the factors we've talked about may have an influencing role, but the cost of living is what really, really drives which side of the river you're going to land on.
When you look at the median sale price in Cincinnati, it ended in 2023, we ended at $270,000. And actually in Northern Kentucky was $260,000.
Yeah, and we both thought the number was going to be, there was going to be more discrepancy there.
Correct.
Because I thought Northern Kentucky would be quite a bit lower.
Yes.
But in looking at those average prices, it really was very close.
Yeah, it was close. So certainly much cheaper to live in Northern Kentucky. Your dollar's going to get you a little bit further over there. And then let's talk a little bit about, the property taxes you know, on the Ohio side of the river in Cincinnati, the property taxes are going to be much higher than they are in Northern Kentucky. However, Kentucky does have that auto tax.
It does, but really when you look at the sales tax and the property taxes combined, it kind of offsets that auto tax, which is more of an inconvenience, I think, than a factor there.
So overall, cost of living, your dollar's going to take you much further. Northern Kentucky is going to win on that side. Yeah,
and if you're coming in and you have really not a lot of room in your budget to work with, I think you can find some great deals on the Northern Kentucky side of the river. If you're, you know, I always say if you're willing to look outside of, you know, the kind of core of Cincinnati, those aren't places that you should rule out because you really can get more square footage for your dollar there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should probably, when we're referring to Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati, we should probably, you know, break down what counties are those, right? As people are searching for homes. So when you think of Cincinnati, it's the major counties are going to be Hamilton County, Butler, Warren, and Claremont counties. And those are the counties that we're referring to when we talk about the Ohio side of the river.
Yeah.
And then over in Kentucky,
we're talking about Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties.
So all the counties that kind of are along the river, except for you get Warren County is a little further north, you know, as you get a little further north on the Ohio side. And when you talk about population, there's about 2.26 million folks that make up the greater Cincinnati MSA, and about 450,000 of those residents are technically in Northern Kentucky.
Right. It's so hard not to call it all greater Cincinnati because I think for most of us, you know, it just feels like Northern Kentucky is an extension.
Correct. I mean, you'll see a lot of people, if you're from Northern Kentucky and say meet someone in Florida, they may say, where are you from? And a lot of times they may just say Cincinnati, because then it's easier to identify with than Covington, Kentucky.
Yeah, or Northern Kentucky, or trying to describe what area you're from. But we've talked about this before. For some people, crossing that river seems like a huge barrier.
Yes, it is. That's what a lot of people say. You know, that river is not far, but it is wide, and there definitely is a little bit of a dividing line. Folks that are from Cincinnati have a hard time going over to that Northern Kentucky side, as well as Northern Kentucky folks moving over to the Ohio side of the river, even though it's so close to each other. But we're starting to see more and more of that happen, especially for some of our empty nesters and things like that really want to take advantage of the views we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that is it. A lot of views pulling a lot of people in who maybe wouldn't have thought about Northern Kentucky as an option before that.
Yeah, yeah. So this one's not so much fun to talk about, right? So let's talk a little bit about crime for folks that are not from the area, try to understand crime. And Cincinnati is much more urban, right? And as you're closer into the river, you're going to have, there's more reported crime on the Cincinnati side of the river than there is in the Northern Kentucky part. As you get further out in Kentucky, it's much more rural, spread out, and not as much reported crime, except for some of the cities that are closer to the river on the Northern Kentucky side.
Right, because Cincinnati, you still have that whole downtown core that you don't have that much feel for in Northern Kentucky.
Right, right. So now that we've talked about something that's not as fun, let's talk about something that is fun.
Well, hopefully it's not leading to crime. But yes. Alcohol.
Hopefully it's not leading to crime. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, there's the beer and the bourbon scene.
Right.
Right.
So Cincinnati is kind of known for its craft beer scene. We see all these breweries opening. They all have their own brands. They all have their own take and their own flavors, and it's amazing. And they started popping up and it took off. It took off,
absolutely. Just like in a lot of cities, but Cincinnati's craft beer scene is incredible. You know, from Rheingeist to Mad Tree, 50 West, and the list goes on and on and on. But it's pretty fun to just see how a lot of them have expanded and create a lot of fun. Now on the other side of the river, we have Braxton as well. Northern Kentucky has some great breweries as well. But while Cincinnati may win on the craft beer scene, but they can't really compete with the bourbon scene.
Right, and you know more about that.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna let you speak to the bourbon.
Obviously, if you're a bourbon lover, what's great is there's actually the Beeline in Northern Kentucky that takes you along to different distilleries. You know, we have New Riff just right across the river, and that is a fabulous, fabulous bourbon. They do a great job. So that's right across the river, and then it's really, really easy to hit any of the Bourbon Trail distilleries, you know, within an hour or so. Along the way, you can stop at different places. So Cincinnati just can't compete with the bourbon scene that we see in Northern Kentucky.
No, yes, but they've got the craft beers.
That's right.
So
that's
what
right.
is it a tie?
It's a tie.
It's a tie.
We're
Depends
gonna
on your
tie.
taste,
Depends,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Depends. Are you, if you're a beer person or a bourbon person? All right, so let's summarize here. Who should and shouldn't live in Northern Kentucky or Cincinnati? What side of the river they should be on based on their preferences. So if you have a tight budget, you should go to Northern Kentucky.
You should, yeah. Like we said, you can get a little more for your dollar there, and I think it's a good option to look at.
Absolutely. And if you don't enjoy the big city,
you should live in Northern Kentucky.
And you probably shouldn't live in Cincinnati.
Right, probably not.
Right.
But maybe a little bit out further in Northern Kentucky, get a little more space between houses, a little more rural feel.
Yeah. And if you enjoy the hustle and bustle of the big city and you're into that foodie scene and love to have all the entertainment right in your backyard, you should go to Cincinnati.
You should. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Maybe consider a nice condo downtown.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
And if you are working on the Ohio side of the river and you have to make that commute to work, you should live on that side so that commute won't be a hassle. But if you're a traveler for work, you're a road warrior, Northern Kentucky is where you should be.
Right, and you need to get to the airport. Maybe you fly out a lot for business, then that's a good option.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a great view, as we mentioned, the Northern Kentucky side of the river has the best views of the Cincinnati skyline. So if that's something that's important to you, I would say you should consider Northern Kentucky.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, to wrap this all up, if you've enjoyed this video, we have many, many more, and actually have one that rates our top 10 suburbs in Greater Cincinnati. So check that one out. And if you've enjoyed our videos, please like and subscribe so that you can never miss another video, and stay tuned to great updates about the real estate market, property tours, and other videos just like this. But Brandy, why don't you wrap it up with the article we were just talking about before we started this?
Yeah, money.com actually listed both Cincinnati and Covington as the in their list of the 50 best places to live. So we've been talking about all the pros and cons, but really you can't go wrong either way.
Yeah, and Covington is, for those that don't know, is just this great little city right across the river. So that hits that Northern Kentucky piece, and both Cincinnati and Covington hit that top 50 places to live by money.
By money.com, and they're really only 1.6 miles apart.
That's right. So both options are fantastic, but hopefully you learned a little bit from this video about the difference between living on the Ohio side versus the Kentucky side, but both are great options to choose depending on what you're looking for.
Right.
If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be notified of our future videos, from property tours, to market information, to other informative videos just like this.